This is an ODB Films production. Visit odbfilms.com today.
In Latin, Renovo means to renew, restore, or revive. The show is all about growing in our understanding and practice of faith. Past episodes are available wherever you like to listen to podcasts. I'm Doug Tuke, the Vice President of Ministry Advancement at ODB Films. And today, we take a look at Catholic fitness. No, we are not talking about Catholic calisthenics, stand-up, kneel, posture. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is the fact that we, human beings, are both physical and spiritual, and that exercise has a huge thing to contribute to your spiritual makeup. And I have had some extensive personal experience in this and am currently kind of engaged in a routine that is absolutely just massively influencing my spirituality. In fact, my wife will tell you when I'm not exercising, I'm just not mentally and spiritually as healthy. My prayer practice, my spiritual life suffers. And just quite frankly, who I am as a dad and a husband suffers. And that's why I wanted to do this show. This is kind of from my gut. I was like, I really want to talk about this. I'm not a big CrossFit guy, but we're going to talk about CrossFit. I've never done Exodus 90. Exodus 90 is this like intense, discipline thing for discerning vocation. It's powerful. Check it out online. It's amazing. My friend Sean did it, and he said it was pretty profound. He did it with a group of guys. That's not really my thing. I lift weights. I do some cardio. I row. I ski, cross country ski. But I want to talk about the bigger part of that. Not a routine to do, but as much as like just the notion of why we exercise. So Socrates says, no citizen has a right to be an amateur in the matter of physical training. What a disgrace it is for a man to grow old without ever seeing the beauty and strength of which his body is capable. He says that in Memorabilia. Now, whether or not he actually had this conversation with the person he was talking to, whose name is Epigenes, it's totally beside the point. What's important about the record of this conversation was the focus on personal health from deep-seated thinking and specifically Greco thinking, Greek thinking. So the modern interest in sets and reps, all that fitness has quite rightly been connected to kind of the modern era. But this doesn't mean that those in the ancient world were not equally concerned with health, strength, and fitness. And you know that our Christianity, our Catholicism, was heavily influenced by ancient Greece and other places, but specifically that kind of Greco culture, the Hellenistic culture, it really informed us. So in ancient Greece, stone lifting, calisthenics, rudimentary forms of kind of dumbbell training, they were practiced by soldiers, athletes, patients, and a host of other groups to train their bodies. Now, I'm not talking about Sparta. You can look that up if you want to. What I'm talking about is it was just part of culture. So exercise was of the utmost value in Greek city-states for lots of different populations, wealthy, poor, whatever. Where people trained, it's almost as important as how they trained. And it's sort of silly to point out that, sport can't take place without a playing field or a court. So likewise, physical training is often kind of difficult without a space to train. And in fact, this is the reason why a lot of us in our homes maybe don't exercise is because we don't have that place to go to. Now, the word gymnasium itself, it's derived from gymnos, meaning naked, as Greek athletes typically trained in their birthday suits. That's just what they did. I don't suggest doing that at the public gym, although I have a really funny story about a guy who did that when I was a teenager in the locker room and was not told not to do that. I think he didn't realize he wasn't in a Greek gymnasium. Anyway, the Sophists, a Greek philosophical school most prominent in the 5th and 4th centuries BCE, they were the first group to begin using the gymnasium as a lecture hall on a pretty regular basis. So this place, this congregational place of exercising in Greek culture, became a place of teaching as well, naturally. So others soon began to emulate the Sophists, including Socrates, one of the best-known Greek philosophers who we talked about, who made the gymnasium his home base. This is where he did almost all of his teaching. And it was for this reason that so many philosophers, from Plato to Aristotle, stressed the importance of an education spanning both mental exertion and physical exercise. Okay? Greek education, as it was conducted in the gymnasium from roughly the 4th century onward, spanned everything, physical exercise and traditional learning. So lifting was necessary for one's development. Physical and mental health worked in tandem in ancient Greece. The gymnasium was at the heart of these developments. Here's why we're talking about that, because Plato and Aristotle informed in many ways Augustine and Aquinas. And Augustine and Aquinas, of course, even if you're a casual reader, Thomistic philosophy really is the underbelly of the theology of the Catholic Church. And it matters because they're coming from a place of holistic learning. It's not enough to just inform the head, which a lot of angry Catholics do. They're angry because they want to solve all of God's theological quandary with their brain. That is not what we were rooted in as a church, as a Greek-informed church. Now, enter in the 21st century CrossFit, okay? CrossFit is amazing in a lot of different ways. CrossFit defines itself as constantly varied functional movements performed at high intensity. In other words, it's a super intense workout that changes every single day. But it's a lot more than that. Each gym, it's called a box, has a community that is an integral part of it. And as the official CrossFit website says, harnessing the natural camaraderie, competition, and fun of sport or game yields an intensity that cannot be matched by other means. Now, some people have described CrossFit as a religion or a cult. It isn't. But there was even a study done on how modern people are finding community, and CrossFit was one of the case studies that is shown to bring meaning to the lives of young adults, particularly millennials, but lots of people. I want to talk about that for a minute because it matters, because I think what CrossFit is doing is strumming a chord of how us as believers naturally are drawn to that type of community. The growth of CrossFit, it's amazing. I mean, it would put almost every modern church to shame. In 2005, they had 15 gyms. In 2014, they had 7,000, and now way, way more, right? So what is it that drives this kind of success and devotion? I want to dig into that. Number one, belonging. Belonging, acceptance, encouragement, and coaching, right? We need God's grace. We'll talk about that more. All right. We need our bodies. They need exercise of some kind. Why? Because we're weak. We're broken. We're imperfect. Okay. Our weakness needs to be supported if we're to grow stronger. CrossFit addresses that. You can see change faster when you have a supporting community around you. In CrossFit, it's generally those who are struggling the most, those that might finish the exercise last, that get the most support, encouragement, cheering. The weakest ones are supported by those who have already finished the exercises before them. This makes sense. This is Pope Francis's your church is a field hospital. That's what this is. Triage is the methodology of ministry. Seek the most broken first. CrossFit does that in the context of exercise. That's amazing. It creates an environment where weakness is absolutely acknowledged, it's accepted, and it's understood that it can be overcome with help. That's the key part. So the fact is, overcoming weakness by yourself, it's always harder than when you have someone to coach you through it and support you. That's a huge deal, okay? The second one is accountability, and then quite frankly, transformation. Because CrossFit's generally done in a group setting, it is built in this kind of accountability system. So what you're accountable to is to reach your own personal goals. That's a huge deal. That's good coaching 101, right? The competition is to get in better shape. So it's really competition with yourself, not other people. All of us are built differently. All of us are, different ages and whatnot. But each day in CrossFit, you do the WOD, the workout of the day. And the path to a better you, it's planned out for you. Here's the workout, go. So your job is to follow through on that plan that's given to you. And the workout is for everyone who comes in, though it can be scaled to each person's, fitness level and ability, right? So the point is to have a chance to get a lot stronger no matter a person's current level of strength or fitness. That's a big deal. Meet them where they're at. You've heard that language in ministry, right? The path to a better you is found in stretching your limitations. That's just good coaching, okay? Number 3, community. It's community. Community happens because there are shared goals and they're sharing time together, right? So the WOD, the workout of the day, is a kind of communal act, right? The members don't get to determine the WOD. It's given to them. All of them do it together. They personalize it to themselves. CrossFit even has what can be called saints, right? Many of the workouts are named after fallen soldiers. So notice that there are high expectations, but they're scaled to those who are currently unable to meet them. That's a huge deal. So the CrossFit community doesn't just happen during a workout. It starts there, quickly spills out into the daily routine of life. A lot of CrossFitters talk about how their social life revolves around those that they meet at the box. There's a gathering space And then their social life expands from there. And they find a lot of meaning at the box. Whether previous generations did the same thing in churches or not is to be determined. But that's a huge deal. Number 4, struggle is part of life. It's natural. And it can be good for you. That's like Catholic Teaching 101. CrossFit has this kind of laser-like focus. They help you get in better shape, find community, support system, and then they do it while expecting a lot out of it. So the struggle is what's good for the body and the rest of you too, your brain as well. It can be a really, really hard workout. You can just be panting and sweating and dying. And then some critics say that the number of injuries in CrossFit are too high. Nevertheless, embracing that struggle means that the result is a better you. And that's the mark. So the same can be said about following our Lord, right? But instead of getting in better physical shape, you get a better spiritual you. That's a big deal. CrossFit can't forgive your sins. It can't get you to heaven or transform your soul, but it's profound. Now, listen, this is a big deal. I'm using CrossFit as an example, but this is a big deal. The example is here to show you that this is natural. It's natural that our bodies want these types of communities. And this is a social critique of church because I think we're lacking a lot of those things. But in the context of just exercising because it's good for you, here's the premise. Both bodies and souls have to be important to the Christian, to the Catholic. Both. That means garbage in, garbage out, okay? We know that God created humans with 2 interconnected parts. We know it. And that the health or sickness of one can influence the health or sickness of the other. God made us and redeems us as whole persons, body and soul. And it's a Catholic, it's a Christian distinctive thing to care about all of it, not just the soul, but the soul and the body. If you're struggling with that, I would argue that your spiritual life is also struggling. I pray all the time, just an ascetic prayer. I'm telling you, the physical part cannot be ignored. There's no way to dissect, to separate the two things. Now, both parts are super valuable. Okay, the Apostle Paul, he goes a step further to help us basically understand the priority. The central passage on this entire topic is in his first letter to Timothy. He's just exhorting him to be a good servant of Christ Jesus. Paul says, train yourself for godliness. For while bodily training is of some value, godliness is of value in every way, as it holds promise for the present life and also for the life to come. The saying is trustworthy and deserving of full acceptance. 1 Timothy 4, 7-9. This matters. Now, a lot of commentators kind of point out that bodily training is an athletic illusion similar to 1 Corinthians 9:25. Paul points there, his points there are basically identical. He contrasts the superior benefits of spiritual training with the limited benefits of physical training. Now, here's the thing. Spiritual training is for the imperishable, wreath and procures value in the present life and in the one to come. Great. Both kinds of training are important, though. But spiritual training, godliness, is most important. They're not of equal value. Now this is getting tough. Now, at this point, let me be really clear, or maybe even kind of confess to you, for whatever incentives the Christian Catholic value of the body brings toward exercise, Paul's words here about godliness can tend to kind of kibosh them, kind of mute them. At least they do for me, okay? So yeah, it's good to do physical exercise because God cares about the body. Incarnation, it matters, right? But actually getting to the exercise, actually picking ourselves up to devote the time towards bodily training is made way more difficult when we know that at best, physical exercise is only second best. That's a profound thought. Our question becomes, how do we bring ourselves to consistently do something that's difficult when we know there is something else we could be doing, which the scriptures and the church say is explicitly more beneficial? Yikes. Okay. Workouts take time. And every workout is the product of a choice to work out rather than read scriptures or participate in prayer devotion. You're making a choice. I'm not even talking about like being lazy. I'm talking about the tension between spirit and body. One way or another, as oversimplified as this might come across, we have to come to grips with the fact that we are expending strenuous effort into a second-rate enterprise. Think that through. That's profound, okay? And that, at least to me, presents a problem for my continued motivation. That's where I struggle. Couldn't I be doing this thing instead? So it seems that the best sustainable solution for basically just continued motivation, which is what it takes to go do CrossFit, to participate in Exodus 90, to go do these amazing workouts, that commitment and physical exercise is to target the spiritual benefits in the actual event of working out. So what are those? This is how I get motivated. So basically, I'm talking about my mental posture, right? I got to step away just from the generalities to kind of refer to some personal trial and error. So one quick answer to our problem, it might seem, is well, I'll listen to podcasts while I'm exercising, or I'll listen to these spiritual teachers, and I get that. If you want spiritual benefits while exercising, maybe you're thinking just listen to good preaching on iTunes. And I'm a podcaster. You're listening to this podcast right now, and maybe you're exercising while doing it, and I think that's fine. Certain kinds of exercises. I have no doubt that it's helpful for some people, and I venture to say that it isn't for most people. Not if you're exerting, at least in some points, peak physical effort. Personally, my past attempts to listen to podcasts typically led to a really deflated workout, and I was just super distracted. And I'm not sure that helped anybody. I wasn't really learning from what I was listening to, and I certainly didn't exercise as well as I could have. So trying to get that last rep to the cadence of someone else's voice, it did not motivate me. Music does, but someone teaching me didn't necessarily. Furthermore, I kind of came away from probably really good content, having only given it kind of this superficial hearing. I never really dug into it. And I think that could be more detrimental than not listening at all, because now I'm judging what I heard and not in a positive way. So beyond podcast, beyond stretching ourselves too thin by simultaneously overwhelming all kinds of faculties, right? I advocate that the spiritual benefit of exercise comes through our mental posture at the moment of our most intense physical exertion. So here's what that means. It gets down to the details of what's going through our minds when we step beyond what's comfortable to do what's necessary. That's great leadership teachers speak. This is when we go from easy to difficult, and that's where grace comes in. That's where grace becomes our great crutch. And I talked about this earlier in the show. By God's grace, not by CrossFit, not by Exodus 90, PX 90, whatever your routine is. It's not by the nature of that you are saved. It's by grace. And grace has a place in exercise. The reality under everything in our lives is the grace of God in Jesus, period. What do we have that we did not receive? 1 Corinthians 4:7. Physical exercise is no different. In fact, actually, perhaps the best way to start any workout is to recognize this in prayer, is to just in silence. Lord, you are the creator. You are the one that has given me this life. One of the practices to remember is just 3 simple things that come out in the form of thanksgiving. Very Catholic prayer, a Eucharistic prayer, a prayer of thanksgiving. First, thank you, God, for my body, that though totally imperfect, it works. It works now, and it will be resurrected one day. That's good Christian teaching, right? Second, thank you for the common grace behind a facility like this that understands the importance of the body, okay? Whether you're at the YMCA, CrossFit, at your home, whatever it is, thank you. Thank you for a space to do this, right? Third, thank you for grace, even when things are really hard. And help me in the toughest moments of this workout to wrestle gravity in the strength you supply. Now listen, the last prayer for me, it just kind of characterizes the mental approach, which really kind of yields the spiritual benefits of physical exercise. It has to do with grace and effort. This matters to me. I do a little bit of lifting, and that's what matters to me. So human exertion at some level is necessary in just about all our waking life, but it is especially felt in exercise. Consider the scenario of exercise when it's most challenging. Maybe it's the last uphill mile or the final 3 reps of the shoulder press. To be sure, listen, we feel the finiteness of all of our resources in those moments, and we will absolutely go somewhere to find the fuel that will help us to finish. There are 10 reps here, and you are just barely pushed up the 7th one. How are you going to get the next 3? You got to find motivation somewhere, all right? And we have lots of different ways of doing that. without even trying to, right? The mind, like a starved animal on the scent of food, it starts digging, right? Frantically trying to find something to hold before our bodies fail as some sort of worthy incentive, right? So the easiest fallbacks are typically pretty self-absorbed because we want to look a certain way, or because we don't want to wimp out, or because we used to be strong, or because we plan to write an article about all of this, whatever it is, okay? The mind that's working in tandem with the body, it's going to default somewhere like this if it's not occupied somewhere else. But what if we train our minds, our souls, to default to grace, right? What if that moment of intense exertion, our motivation, became the demonstration of God's grace in our sweating, straining, desperate effort? We can't lift that bar. We can't breathe on our own. We didn't create ourselves, and yet we lift that bar. We will breathe. We are God's creatures by His grace, okay? Does that grace language find its way into exercise for you? And when we lift that bar, the very moment of lifting the bar, we're bearing witness to our person that God's grace mobilizes us to do things. This matters, right? Everything in that moment is given to us, and yet we're working. Grace and effort, right? When we set our minds on the demonstration of God's grace in the actual experience of His grace beyond our effort, listen, the gym becomes a spiritual training compound. It becomes a place where we expand ourselves. Any kind of exercise does that. It becomes an experience, a practice field, a gymnasium that we can be transposed into weightier matters. We can do more than we thought we could. The more we prove to ourselves the presence of God's grace in our work, the more and more we're equipped for the sake of our sanctification, the blessing of the sacramental gift, to press in on that grace whenever and wherever the going gets tough. And this becomes our goal. This transposition becomes the fuel for that final push. We can do hard work, right? Knowing that we are counted righteous by faith and the works of our lives, and that we're commanded to work out our salvation in God's strength. Read Romans 4:5, Philippians 2:12, right? We can walk away after a good hour of physical exercise, thirsty and heart-pounding, learning to say about that, and then all the other things, I just worked hard, though it was not I, but the grace of God that is with me, 1 Corinthians 15:10. That matters. I think that has more. I think what it does is it broadens your spiritual life. It opens up, wait a minute, the way I move and train my body is the way I want to move and train my mind. And the two begin to interplay with each other. They begin to seamlessly connect. And when you encounter those difficult moments, because of your physical exertion and your ability to overcome it, you navigate it with a different mindset. And in that mindset, you gain confidence. And then when you encounter another difficult moment of exertion, you overcome it with the power of your mind. Those things are beautiful. Bodily training, after all, is of some value, obviously. But listen, godliness, spirituality is of value in every way. So let's aim for both at the same time. If you're into CrossFit, awesome. If you're participating in something like Exodus 90, outstanding. But the activity should not exist for the sake of the activity. It exists for the sake of the transformation of body and soul. After all, our Christianity, deeply rooted in great Greek teaching, the highest level of teaching, Platonic, Aristotelian teaching, proves to us those two must be connected, and we've got work to do. Thank you, St. Paul, for just explaining that to us in the words. Awesome. Thanks for listening. Sincerely. We're partners in the journey of faith. I hope you'll share this Renovo podcast with friends and foes and people that you work out with. Send your topic suggestions, questions, and/or comments to doug@odbfilms.com. Always remember to engage the tradition and live the conversion. Until next time, God bless.